Hey guys, Spartan here with a follow-up to the previously made top 10 worst trinkets in Darkest Dungeon with the top 10 best trinkets in Darkest Dungeon. Now, this won't be just a list of like, oh, these are all super late game trinkets that you'll get like by the end of the game. This is because I will be grading trinkets, much like the last time, based off of not just power level, but also the time at which you can get them. So, trinkets that you get early on in the game have a good chance of actually getting on this list instead of it all being Number 1, Ancestor Trinket. Number 2, Ancestor Trinket. Number 3, you get the point. So, let's just start this off at number 10. Now, this is not a good precedent for the point I just made, but number 10 is the Ancestor's Signet Ring. Now, this gets to number 10 for being... Alright, I did dock this a whole lot for being an ancestral trinket that you get at about late game, because you're going to need to complete a long champion mission for this, or you may get it from an Ancestors pack that you get in specific missions, but that's not the way that people usually get this trinket. So what it does is, it's very simple, plus 10% stress is the downside at the cost for the benefit of 10% protection and 10 accuracy. There is no unit in the game that does not want 10 accuracy, and 10 protection is just straight up good. Like, there is no unit that does not want this trinket or cannot use this trinket. Because damage dealer, in the front lines, like, you're going to want a bit of accuracy so your attacks hit, and, of course, since you're in the front lines, you'll be taking less damage, so that's good. Tank can use this. Even a healer in the back line can use this just to make it so they don't have to apply a bit of pressure to themselves, you know? But yes, this, of course, is only at number 10, sadly, because while it is great, you only get it at the end of the game. Much like the last one, at number 9 we have the Vial of Sand. Now, this is an occultist-only Crimson Court trinket, and it is actually really good. It gives you 20 stun chance, which is great for the occultist because he has, like, the best stun in the game. It gives you 20 move skill chance, which, hey, Abyssal Pull or whatever it's called, I don't know, I don't use it too much. That is still a good move. Getting in a bit of extra pull chance on that just to make sure that you don't fail. You know, you can never go wrong with that. 20 debuff chance. Occultist has a lot of good debuffs, and it also gives you 20 stun resistance. Now, stun resistance is, of course, like, usually a neglected stat, but you will definitely notice it when it goes off. If you're playing, like, in the Warrens, and you have those stupid pigs that throw spike balls at you to stun you, having an occultist resist a stun and get off a heal is actually really good. Also, this trinket actually has no downside, which is unheard of for trinkets with so many upsides. Of course, the big downside is that you will be getting this trinket usually incredibly late in the game, considering it's a Crimson Court trinket. Unless you're very lucky, and potentially you could get this like at about week 3 from the Crocodilian mission. Or if you want to abuse the fact that you can just loop that mission infinitely, but let's not talk about that because it's unintended. Number 8, Blasphemous Vial. Now, Blasphemous Vial is single-handedly the best and worst designed trinket at the same time, because it gives the Plague Doctor everything she needs. It gives her a bit of accuracy, it gives her stun chance, it gives her blight chance, and it does give her 25% extra stress, which is a huge amount to have, but it covers the Plague Doctor's basically every basis except for, like, Incision and healing synergy, but that's a bit too much to ask for. And the reason I say it is one of the worst designed trinkets as well is because it's kind of a crutch. Like, every time you run Plague Doctor, you'll be wanting to run this trinket. It's like too good. This is the only real instance I think that there is a staple trinket, with the exception of, like, one other trinket that you'll see on this list soon. But, yeah, Blasphemous Vial. You can get this actually very early on, considering it's a very rare trinket, which means you can get it as a boss drop. Some people like to wait until their favorite very rare trinket appears to do their first boss, and that is in fact, like, very viable. Like, if you have a bunch of Plague Doctors, you want Blasphemous Vial, it's pretty good. So, yep, good trinket. Number 7 on the list, the Heavy Boots. The Heavy Boots are a uncommon trinket, and you can get these, like, incredibly early on in the run if you're lucky, or you can, like, buy them from the Nomad Wagon. This is one of the few trinkets I would recommend buying from the Nomad Wagon at the start of the game, even if it does set you back a bit of gold. The investment you get is worth it. So, it gives you 40 move resist, So, you know, that's pretty good if you're running a frontline unit like a Leper that absolutely does not want to be moved back and you want to take no chances. He has good move resist, but this will pretty much guarantee he doesn't get moved. Gives you 20 protection. For reference, Barristan's Head, a very rare trinket, gives you 25% protection, but that also gives you plus 20% stress. So this gives you a better deal. Because the downside of this trinket is 2 speed. Speed is a very important stat, but it isn't so important that you need to avoid, like the plague, any speed downs. Like, Crusader can run this no problem, and like it'll do pretty much no difference to what he normally does, and it's just pure upside for that unit. Sure, you don't want to run this unit for, like, super fast units, like maybe the Grave Robber, the Highwayman, or Plague Doctor. Even though it is kind of viable to run it on them, just to prevent them from being pulled into the front lines. But yeah. Heavy Boots is pretty good, and you should run it. It especially has uses late game, and against bosses such as the Crew, so you don't get pulled, or shuffled, or stumbled. I believe, yeah, that's the word. Number 6, Surgeon's Gloves. Now, accuracy is one of the things you want early game, considering the fact that you don't have infinite access to, like, Jester, or Command Man-at-Arms, or anything like that. So, an extra bit of accuracy alone is pretty good. Extra crit for melee skills as well is damn good. And the only cost you pay is move resist and debuff resist. Those aren't really that dangerous for a lot of comps. Like Highwaymen, there is basically no downside to these. I mean, sure, debuff resist, there may be a few debuffs, like at veteran level, like, they're mostly just tiny things like dodge debuffs or make a bit of bleed resist debuffs, but it's, like, not worth going out of your way. Like, who buffs their own debuff resist? And if nobody's going to buff debuff resist, what's the downside of actually, like, decreasing that a little for the upside that you get from the Surgeon's Gloves? Not too much. You would even run this on Leper, and sure, he hates being moved, but there's not a great deal of enemy abilities that move you back to that are in, like, all regions, or especially at, like, the early game. Halfway there, number 5, we have Broken Key. Now, Broken Key is, like, the staple trinket for Abomination. It gives 15 accuracy and 35 stun chance at the cost of, like, 10 stress. So basically, this turns Abomination's stun base at level 0, or level 1, I guess you could say, to 125, which is incredibly good. So, level 5, it's going to be 165% base, which rivals pretty much every other stun in the game. I believe Abomination's stun chance was... yeah, it is like 90% base, so this kind of makes up for that downside. And I mean, 15 accuracy is... it's just a heap. Like, why would you not run a 15 accuracy trinket that only gives you, like, minus 10 or plus 10 stress? Ancestor's Signet Ring gives 10 accuracy, and, of course, the same stress downside. And that's an ancestral trinket. Now, that's a bit defensive, and this one's more aggressive, I guess you could say. But this one also has the upside of the fact that you can get this one fairly early on in the game, because this is a crystalline trinket, which means that you can just buy it from the Nomad Wagon section. And it is also one of the cheapest ones. I think this one is only 45 shards, so it's actually very cheap. Or was it 35? I don't know. Either way, this is an incredibly cheap trinket that, if you're running Abomination, you should get every single time. The one downside is that this kind of pigeonholes Abomination into stun form, but basically that's what most people do with Abomination anyway. I mean, you can still run, like, his other moves, considering that the Broken Key gives 15 accuracy to everything, not just range skills, but still, gives him the best stun in the game. Well, okay, not as good as a Cultist, but pretty damn good. At number 4 on the list, we have the Bleed Amulet. Now, the Bleed Amulet is an uncommon trinket. You can get this pretty early in the run, much like a couple other trinkets on this list. You can see that there's a bit of a theme here, considering the fact that generally when you get a trinket earlier, you get more value out of it because you'll have it for more of the game, hence why it's a bit better that it exists. So yes, with this trinket you get 20 bleed chance, 20 bleed resist, at the cost of 20 blight resist. Now, a lot of heroes have bleed chances, or at least bleed skills. There is the Flagellant, obviously that's like his whole kit. There's the Hellion, there's the Highwayman, there's the Houndmaster, there's technically the Occultist. I mean, you'll never run this on Occultist, but hey, if you want a meme, you can run it. And basically, there isn't too many skills in the game that actually apply Blight. Like, most of the time they are limited to the wield. I don't think, like, any enemies in the Cove use Blight. I don't think any enemies, like, in the Ruins use Blight. Except for, of course, spiders, but they're, like, the exception and not the rule, because they, like, spawn everywhere. And there's the snakes that spawn everywhere after the Shieldbreaker Nightmares, but those are so rare. So yeah, not only are you getting offensive buffs in the terms with the extra bleed chance, you're also getting defense in terms of bleed, and a lot of enemies have bleed, in case you haven't noticed. Cultists and bandits spawn pretty much everywhere, and they bleed. You've got big bleeds like the Uka crabs, you've got the pigs in the warrens, the choppers, you have the ghouls, those do bleeds as well, pretty nasty ones too, considering that, you know... Okay, no, not really, but still, ghouls are dangerous. I'm not going to list off literally every single bleed in the game, but trust me, there's a whole bunch of them. So, this is a pretty good trinket. It isn't probably anyone's, like, maximum choice in terms of, like, oh, I must have this, like, by the end of the game at least, but at the time you can get it, it is definitely a welcome boost in power to a unit. At number 3, we have Junior's Head. Now, this is probably a controversial take, but Junior's Head is actually an incredibly good trinket. First off, you can get this pretty early in the run. You just need to kill Collector or find it in a secret room. And what it gives you is 30% healing skills and plus 20 stress. Now, this has the benefit of being a neutral trinket, meaning that you can run this on Occultist, Crusader, Arbalist, bloody Houndsmaster, Flagellant, and it'll work for every single one of them. So, there is a lot of flexibility you can do with this, and, I mean, getting extra stress is bad, but it isn't, like, that bad that you need to focus on, like, super taking care of it. I mean, with this, you can run, like, Vestal, or pretty much any hero, and then just slap, like, a Jester or something on it, and you should be fine. So, yep, this is a great trinket. You can get, like, you can get this at, like, week 3 or something like that. That's how quick you can get this trinket. And you will be using it for a fairly long time. In fact, you may be using it until the end game as well, if you're running, like, Healing Occultist, because Occultist doesn't really have a healing trinket until maybe, like, at the end of the game where you swap it out for the Ancestor's Scroll. Second place, Focus Ring. The Focus Ring is a very good trinket, considering it gives you 10 accuracy and 5 crit, at the cost of just 8 dodge. It doesn't even give you stress or anything like that. So this is a very rare trinket, meaning you can get it as a boss drop. So you can get this super early in the game. In fact, what I do most of my games is I wait until the Apprentice Necromancer drops the Focus Ring, and I will go for that as my first very rare trinket, because this trinket carries at the early game. Like, 10 accuracy at the start of the game is no joke. This is the point where your base accuracy is essentially 85. So turning that up to a 95, where 95 is basically, this move is going to hit, is a great difference. 5 crit may not be that important, considering the fact that crit isn't a great stat to focus on early game, but it gives it some potential late game where crit is actually very viable strategy for late game. In fact, most people try to stack up crit as much as possible late game because it guarantees dealing maximum damage times 1.5. And the 8 dodge isn't a great deal of pain unless you're running like it on Grave Robber or Jester, but for those units they generally have stuff that you can use otherwise. Grave Robber has junk like Lucky Talisman that gives ranged accuracy and dodge. Jester has, well, Battle Ballad, so he can just focus on getting dodge instead of using the Focus Ring. And other units have ways to buff their accuracy, except for the frontliners. But the frontliners can use this very well, considering that they don't really rely on dodging. Like, you're gonna use Leper, and you think he's gonna dodge anything? No, you're more likely to, like, just lock Risk Taker in or something like that. Sure, dodging is nice, but so is dealing massive damage to the enemy with high consistency. There are plenty of, like, trinkets I could put on this list for honorable mentions, because there are some very good ones that didn't quite make the list. But for number 1, I have to give it to the Ancestors map. So this is an ancestral trinket, yes, but it's a Shambler drop, so you can get this very early in the run if you have a way to deal with Shamblers, and quite honestly, Apprentice Shamblers are fairly easy if you have the right party for it. They do spawn a little less than normal. You're going to need to basically rely on finding an altar, because the chance of finding a Shambler in pitch blackness is 1% at that level. But at low levels, riposts, which are the best way to deal with the Shambler, are actually best in their accuracy. Considering that riposts have a static amount of accuracy, it's like 85% accuracy, and that doesn't increase per level. So you will be hitting them for a little less damage than normal on the riposts, considering, or at least comparing to max levels, but you'll be having an easier chance of actually hitting the damn thing with them. So, if you want to go and get this trinket, which gives you 25 scouting chance, and 25 trap disarm, which isn't that important, but it can be good for stress healing by switching around, at the downside of just 10% stress, then just go hunt some Shamblers. And 25 scouting chance may not seem like a whole bunch, but it usually puts your scouting chance up to a roughly 50%, and that includes the ability to double scout. So you need to take into consideration that when you enter a room, or like even in the starting room, you have a 50% chance to get a scout, and there's a chance of that to be a double scout, meaning that if you get a double scout, and you don't hit a double scout in the next room you reach, there is still the room after that for which you can get at least either a 1 or 2 scout. And scouting is very good because it means you can't be surprised, and you have extra chance to surprise the enemy. So, yep, Ancestors map, you will be using this mostly for the rest of the game. As in, if you have any spare slots, like, if it's not 100% required that every unit on your team has 2 very specific trinkets, there's a good chance that you'll be running this, because it's just so good. Alright, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any thoughts to put in, or any trinkets you believe should be on this list, like, oh hey, put the Smoking Skull on this list because it's like 35 dodge for the Antiquarian, write them in the comments and I'll take a look at them, and I may very well respond with my own thoughts or reasoning for that I didn't put them on the list. Or maybe you think that something deserves to be higher on the list, like Broken Key should be number 1? Maybe. Possibly. So yep, I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next video that I make. Until then though, goodbye.